What's up, YouTube? Here I am gonna give you guys my ace deck profile that I took to GenCon 2023, the offline regionals. Just here to report how I did. Got a 35th place, going 7-2 with ace of all things post ban list. So here I'm just gonna get straight into the deck profile. So going into the event, I actually felt like there's gonna be a lot of red in the format. Specifically Zoro, and I actually figured Whitebeard was going to still be fairly popular post ban list because of the results at the Oceania Regional. So my anticipation was I'm going to fight a lot of Zoro, a lot of Whitebeard, probably some Katakuri, and a decent amount of Law. I was mostly correct. I actually did not play into much Katakuri or Big Mom at all. It was mostly just the three matchups I mentioned prior with some Doflamingo sprinkled in. So luckily, I read the room fairly correctly. It got a lot of Zoro matches in, a lot of Whitebeard matches in, and some Law sprinkled in there, and a couple of Dofis as well. So just to start off, we got our one-drop Searchers. We got 4 Buggy. This card is incredible, just absolutely oppressive against Law and Zoro, who are Slash leaders, and also their decks play a lot of Slash characters. It's kind of shocking, to be honest, that some people still don't think about the fact that Buggy is Slash immune, but it does end up happening. It's very relevant for keeping up board control, and it's also relevant for knowing what targets to start to remove a lot when you have to kind of push pressure early game with Buggy. There's many turns where as ace you are putting Dawn on Buggy to swing just to like put pressure on the opponent, get cards out of their hand, or force them to take early life. Because of the ban list affecting Marcos, you have to take a bit more of an aggressive approach than previously, because you can't really sit behind multiple Marcos reviving every single turn over and over again. So you kind of have to go a little bit more aggressive with it. And so Buggy's 3K stat line helps with that a lot. Next we have Izo, Whitebeard Pirate Searcher. Izo, not as good as Buggy for a couple of reasons, one of them being the worst stat line. Whitebeard Pirate cards are definitely good, but being able to generically find red events is usually the way to go. But you do need Izo to be finding you Marcos, so obviously still a really strong addition to the deck. And if you don't find the cards that you're looking for at the end of the day, Izo is still adding like half of the events that you need to get to your hand. So overall, I mean, just how are you gonna not play Izo in a Whitebeard Pirates leader deck, right? Next we have 2 Striker. So Striker, I think, is a card that is fairly strong, but only in very specific matchups, right? I think that in yellow, Striker can be pretty good, and I think that against Whitebeard, Striker is pretty good. So the reason being is that against yellow, there are certain times where you have to kind of push, like they are really good at elongating the game once they start dropping big moms and start recurring a lot of life. So you have to kind of you have to be able to survive, basically, is how that works. And so Striker allows you to basically rest the stage and rest to Dawn, and then you can search top 5 for a red event, which is really strong specifically to find defensive cards so that you can, not die. Because a lot of times, right, you can use as much Dawn as you want, but one swing is one swing, and yellow does play cards like Brûlé, they have Yukaku Sovereignty, so sometimes the 2k that you're adding to an attack doesn't really matter that much. And so it's actually more beneficial to be using that Dawn as a way to use Striker, find a defensive event, right? So you're converting your offensive Dawn into defensive power on the following turn. It lets you survive one more turn, lets you block life one more time, or block 4 life one more time, and then you can effectively just try to close the game on the following turn once that's all said and done. Against Whitebeard, it's incredibly important too, not just yellow, because against Whitebeard, they'll drop 9 cost, and if they don't swing with any characters, you have nothing to swing at. You just gotta, all you can really do is like maybe swing kind of low, but it's not really an effective use of your Dawn, so you're just trying to use Striker to survive one more turn. Now that Whitebeard's only at 1, even if they find 9 cost, you can just kind of push forward through, like on the next turn. The only problem is you need a next turn, which is, again, we're converting our offensive Dawn on one turn into a more defensive play on the following turn, right? So we're using our Dawn now to be defensive next turn. Against Law too, sometimes this comes up, but it's only really because Law is a deck with a bunch of weenies, so donning up your characters is usually not really that necessary, and Law, especially when he's starved for cards and starved for board presence, will just kind of take life regardless of how high you swing at him. So it's just kind of a waste to sometimes be putting on Dawn on your leader to swing at characters like Law, who really thrive off card advantage. So Striker just kind of lets you take that Dawn and keep up in cards rather than swing at a leader who was already going to take the life regardless. So those are our searchers. For other 1-drops we have Makino and we have Otama. These two are both really strong for separate reasons. Makino lets you pump up your weenie so that they can swing. It's honestly really, really important to be playing Makino to apply early game pressure so that you can get ahead while you can. Late game, this deck does not do too well, so you definitely need to be keeping up tempo in the early game, or at least even attempting to out aggro in a lot of cases. So Makino pumping up Buggy, pumping up Izo, just so you can get your quick swings in, play really aggro. It's really important, I think, right now to be doing that. So Makino, definitely an important addition, and at worst is a 2k counter. Otama is a really good card to combo with a lot of the events in your deck. Generally, I actually don't prefer to play Otama because you kind of need the early game defense to protect your life so that you can have something for the late game. And your deck is very trigger heavy, so keeping a lot of life for the late game is actually generally pretty useful because you'll hit triggers, you'll like be able to clear bodies, subtract power from the opponent, etc., etc. And so Otama is pretty crucial as a 2k counter to be using, but in very clutch scenarios where you need something to have minus 2k power to get him into the threshold of a Fire Fist hit or a Jet Pistol or a Flame Emperor, it's just an extremely useful and versatile card that can, really come up in clutch when you need it. Finishing off our 2k counters, we're only playing 2 Jozu. So Jozu, you can play him for 4, attach a Dawn, he's a brusher for 5. I think, honestly, I maybe used him one time, and it was in a position where I literally had no other play in a losing board state, so I just kind of Hail Married Jozu and tried. It failed. I lost that game. It's fine. Jozu is mainly just here because he's searchable. He's a searchable target off Izo, and he's a 2k counter. That's pretty much the only real reason he's in here. I did have a higher Jozu ratio previously, but the reason I cut him down so that I could opt for more Makino is because, because there's not enough Marco, you have to take a more aggressive stance. I want the Makinos to be more aggressive. Jozu is not a very strong body to play. And he's just easy to out. He's only a 4k, so it's just, he's not very strong. I'm also not on the Whitebeard Pirates event, so I don't really need that many Whitebeard name bodies in the deck in order to, have that card function consistently. So I just decided to just cut the Jozu down, bring the Makino up. It's a pretty simple choice. In terms of other 4k bodies, we got, or 4 cost bodies, we have a blocker Marco. This card is just incredibly clutch. Some matchups, especially like yellow and Whitebeard that are going to go on a little longer, having a blocker that just constantly recurs himself turn after turn is honestly so invaluable to the matchup. It's very unfortunate that he got hit, but frankly, I kind of understand why. But Marco, at the end of the day, incredible card that you definitely want to be putting in this deck just for very clutch situations. I don't generally like having one-ofs in decks because they're inconsistent, but when it's something as potent as Marco that can really make the difference between winning and losing a game while also being searchable off Izo, it's a pretty easy include. Especially, he even has 1k counter, so even for games where you don't feel like you need that Marco to come back over and over again, which has happened to me, I just trash him for counter. Not too bad. This next card, we have the 4-cost Brook. If you don't recognize the art, it's the OP01 Brook. But basically, his effect is Dawn X1 when attacking. You give 2 opponent characters minus 2k power for the turn. This card is honestly incredible. So even before, right, it would be silly to play Marco on curve because you're probably not at 2 life. So if they out the Marco when you're before 2 life, you can't really bring back the Marco. There's not many bodies to be playing at 4 Dawn in this deck, so I've seen some people opt for Namiel, I've seen some people opt for Atmos or Speedjill, other Whitebeard pirate cards that are just like vanillas, right? And so I actually have gone in the middle, and I picked a technically not searchable, but that's why we're at 4, the 4/5 Brook, who has 1k counter, so even if you're in a matchup where you don't need him necessarily, like against the Zoro per se, Brook is very strong. But he combos extremely well with the theory of the deck, right? You just have so much power-based removal that him being able to minus 2k to cards is just incredibly strong. Many times have I actually found myself facing a 9-cost Whitebeard on curve. So I just go, okay, well, I attach to Brook, swing, minus 2k to him, and then we Flame Emperor the Whitebeard, and we are just off to the races. Never have to deal with a 9-cost. There's a lot of cases where Brook, in tandem with other cards like Fire Fist, just absolutely obliterate boards. Against Big Mom, they play a bunch of bodies. You know, they have the 4/6s and they have the 3/5s, the 4/5s even. So, I mean, you just go Brook effect, kill everything. It's a great 1-don investment, and as opposed to something like Otama, where playing Otama means getting rid of a 2k counter in hand, you're just simultaneously applying pressure while also swinging with Brook. And it's also really nice because it kind of baits removal in a lot of cases as well. A lot of people look at this Brook and they understand pretty quickly why this is going to be a strong card in Ace. So they do remove it, which is fine by me generally, because usually it's like, especially because the removal that is going to be most popular, that I anticipated to be most popular and probably was most popular for the format, is Fire Fist. Realistically, they're just like outing Brook Buggy, Brook Makino, Brook Izo. It's like the low-cost cards in this deck, they're not too prevalent, so it's usually pretty alright. In terms of other bodies that we play, we have 4 Marco. The 5-cost Marco is such a strong card in the deck. Just because he's a really sticky body, you don't play... you have a really high event cost in this deck, so it's, for me, my list, I believe, has 17, and then I also have 2 Striker, so I don't really have too many spots for a lot of like mid-curve characters, but Marco is really strong because, you know, on KO, he just trash a red event from hand, he comes back. He's really good at being sticky, and that is perfect for this deck because, generally speaking, you are focusing on removing other guys, not keeping up tempo by replacing your guys with new bodies, right? And so Marco reviving himself is just incredibly strong. I think also he pops 3Ks on board, combos with Brook, combos with Otama, combos with some other events in this deck, but obviously being able to just kind of KO cards while also playing a card that is difficult to KO, no brainer. I mean, he's just one of the best cards in the format, period. So, rounding out our character cards, we have 3 Ace. I opted for extremely low amounts of top end, so I've seen people on 4 Ace, I've seen people play 9-cost Whitebeard, but this is just the only top end I want to be playing, and somehow, sometimes, I still saw too many. Against the 1 red Zoro match, I actually saw 3 aces in hand, and that is definitely not what you want. He has 0 counter. He is not really trashable for any reason. Like, a lot of the counter events in your hand you can use as counter, so when you're in clutch situations and you need just an extra 1k, you can do that. Ace cannot do that. You might notice that the rest of the characters, sans Buggy, all have counter, and Buggy technically, in a way, almost does have counter because he'll find you an event and that'll be a 1k regardless because of the leader ability, so I wouldn't worry about that. But Ace is so good at destroying boards. He's so good at applying quick pressure, being kind of a surprise. I mean, when people see you're at 7 Dawn, 8 Dawn, 9 Dawn, 10 Dawn, Ace is probably always something that you got to be considering. But for the most part, he's a pretty strong card, and just absolutely fantastic. He gives value to your weenie characters as well. I forgot to mention this with Brook because he does the same thing. But when you're reducing cost or reducing power of characters and you have like Izos and Buggies on board, you can start swinging at them with the Izos and the Buggies, and it just makes it so that your value off of a lot of situations is just incredibly strong. So minus 3k to 2 guys is just ridiculous. You can do that with like Fire Fist, for example, and it's just you can take care of an 8 and a 7. It's just you don't usually get value that strong per se, but like the fact that you don't have to worry about a lot of threats like that, really strong. And like Ace Seaquake is just really good. Just Ace Fire Fist, Ace, like it could be like a lot of things. Just it's just such a strong card that like you gotta play him. But I don't want to run at 4 because the no counter genuinely does hurt a lot, and somehow I am still finding myself occasionally bricking on Ace. But when he works, there is no card that does it like him, so we gotta play him. In terms of our removal spells, so those are all the characters and the striker that we're playing as the searcher. In terms of the rest of the deck, it is all going to be events. It's just all events. Ace's leader ability, just it loves events. You use them to defend yourself, you use them to close. It's just really clutch to have the ability that Ace does so that you can play all of the really broken red answer cards, but not really see the downside of not having to establish bodies, right? And so you are able to play 3 Seaquake. This is really good against Zoro, really good against Law, just kills a small body. And the trigger is really strong too. Basically minus 3Ks to an opponent's card, which is more relevant than I would like to say, but it is just really, really strong. Next, we got Fire Fist. Oh, and the one cost for Seaquake, honestly invaluable. It's so good. Being able to combo it, especially with like Brook and whatnot, it's just like 2 Dawn, kill a 6K, or excuse me, 2 Dawn, kill a 5K. It's just ridiculous. But next we got Fire Fist. So Fire Fist, you got to trash an event from your hand, but it lets you KO 2 characters on board, one with 5 and one with 4 power. Honestly, insane. Just straight up insane card. It's probably the best removal spell that we have right now. Considering Zoro is probably the best deck to use it, and it just makes the Law matchup so easy. Fire Fist is honestly like just a ridiculous card, and especially with the cards that we're playing, we have like Otama and like 4-cost Brook and whatnot. It's so easy to just destroy your opponent's board and keep them kind of quelled while you just amass cards, like keep your bodies on board because your bodies might be stickier because you got Buggy who can't be killed by Slash, you got the Marcos who just refuse to die when you trash events, and that's also one of the important things. We have so many events for the Marco fodder. It's just so difficult for people to take care of Marco. But we also got 2 Jet Pistol. The trigger's really strong, KO 5, 6K. The trigger on Fire Fist is also alright, KO 5K. It does come up sometimes, but Jet Pistol just KOs one character with 6K or power, or 6K power or less. It's just an efficient card in terms of card advantage and in terms of what's around. So like if you want to kill a Law, you kill him with Jet Pistol. If they play a 4/6, you can kill him with Jet Pistol. It's just a really strong card overall. Like it's still pretty good, less relevant now than previously, but I anticipated Whitebeard being pretty relevant, so I just decided to opt for Jet Pistol regardless, and it definitely was working out for me in a lot of cases. And again, of course, you can always just combo with Brook, combo with Otama, and just be killing 8Ks instead. So Jet Pistol, just a really strong card. Only searchable off Striker and Buggy, but the fact that we have 2 searchers at all for events like this is how I can justify keeping that at 2, as well as keeping Flame Emperor at 2, especially because Flame Emperor is also searchable at Izo. But effectively, Flame Emperor it's just a really strong card because you don't play as many bodies as other decks. So having the double attack on Flame Emperor is just really efficient, right? So like Jet Pistol kills a 6K for 4. Flame Emperor KOs an 8K for 7 and gives your leader 3000 power and gives him double attack. And the trigger is also to KO a 6K power character, just like Jet Pistol. So Flame Emperor, in terms of Dawn efficiency, is just better. It's simply just better in terms of efficiency. If you don't need a card to be doing what Flame Emperor does, Jet Pistol is absolutely fine, and that's why we play it. You can't play it as early as Flame Emperor, and sometimes it lets you leave Dawn up when you have the Jet Pistol. But Flame Emperor just outs so many threats so easily, while also being just as Dawn efficient by giving your leader 3K power. So you spend 4 to out a card with this, but so you get 4, but then the extra 3 is technically just kind of being put on your leader, right? So you swing for 8, you have double attack, which is really good because, again, you don't have new bodies. And that lets you kind of set up a scenario where the opponent is either forced to block or or you can just swing for game. A lot of times too, I'll go like 8 and attach a Dawn, swing for 9. I'll even like use leader effect to swing for 9, and it'll force them to pitch 3 cards so that they don't lose tempo, and it's just so strong. So Flame Emperor, definitely, if I wasn't on Striker, I would probably be playing 3, but because I do have the access to the Striker card, and Striker is usually a card I want to be playing in matchups where I want to be able to live into late game a little bit longer. Usually those decks that do that, like Whitebeard and Katakuri, they play big bodies, so Flame Emperor is definitely going to be really relevant, specifically in those matchups where I want Striker anyway, so I can decide I just am willing to play a little, like one less copy of Flame Emperor than I normally would. So that's it for the removal spells. We got Seaquake, Fire Fist, Jet Pistol, and Flame Emperor. Really strong stuff to just kind of control the opponent's board. Finally, what we got in the deck is the defensive events. So before I go on to, I mean, it's just simple. Guard Point, 1 for 3. Radical Beam, 1 for 4. There's really not much to talk about with these cards. It's just they're the best, the most efficient defense that you have in the deck. And the deck is so full of other answers. You could play a Red Hawk. Red Hawk is definitely a card I would consider, especially right now with Law and Zoro running amok. I think it's pretty strong to run Red Hawk. The only reason I did not was because I just felt like it was a little too expensive for how I generally was trying to play the deck in most cases, but I definitely could see an argument for Red Hawk. I think the trigger on Red Hawk is really, really clutch in a lot of scenarios too, where you minus 10k to something. So I definitely do respect Red Hawk, and I think if you can find room for it in your build, absolutely go for it. It's a good card right now. Final card, I just have 2 Crossfire. So this is kind of a card that has 2 effects essentially that are the same thing. It's a main and a counter event. So you can either use it to combo with other cards, so you can use it with like Seaquake to kill a 7 for 3, which is really strong, or you could use it with like you can use it with Fire Fist, you can use it with Jet Pistol, you can even use it for Flame Emperor to KO a Big Mom if you really want to. But Crossfire at 2, once again, it's kind of like the same thing as Flame Emperor. Usually I don't really want this card unless it's going to be in a matchup like a Whitebeard, or in a matchup like Katakuri or Big Mom, where I have to deal with the really big bodies with the really big swings. So generally Crossfire is good for those matchups where you have to just hold up to -4. And so that's pretty much my Red Hawk in some sense. It's not a counter event while also doubling as a removal spell, right? Like Red Hawk. So, but it's a little bit more flexible in the ability to be able to be used on my own turn. So, and the trigger event, and the trigger is to -4k power, which is still pretty strong. So I'm not too beat up about not playing Red Hawk. Crossfire definitely fulfills the niche like fairly well, but again, Red Hawk, very strong card. I would consider it. But yeah, that's my ace list. Again, went 7-2. I think my luck was either a little better, maybe I could have done better. If I'd prepared for the Doflamingo matchup a little bit better, perhaps I could have done a little bit better. My losses were to Zoro because I was bricking. I had 3 aces by the 6th on turn. Just wasn't very pretty. Only saw 1-2k the whole game. And honestly, that made the difference. So had that round 1 gone a little different, maybe my result would have been better. Maybe I would have bubbled into top 32. But also could have changed my bracket. But I think not being prepared for Doflamingo is definitely an oversight on my part. So if I were to improve anything, I would try to be playing cards that would be better into Doflamingo. I would start considering cards like Rush Luffy, maybe more Jet Pistol, but things that deal with that strong mid curve that Doflamingo has. But other than that, I think I did pretty well, performed fairly decently. Ace is definitely a difficult leader, so if you're not seeing success with your list, definitely try to specify it to counter the local meta that you're dealing with or what you anticipate to be at a regional, and then just keep on trying to get the reps in. There's a lot of flexibility in this deck in terms of how you're allowed to play as well as how you're allowed to build. So definitely don't be discouraged if you don't see the results immediately. I know for myself, I was doing a little bit worse at locals than I was because I was preparing my list for GenCon. And so, but actually going to the event, playing in the event, and then getting what I was anticipating, you have to put a lot of faith in yourself as well as the deck that you bring in order to succeed with Ace, which is what keeps them out of the absolute top tier. But I think as long as you are being careful enough and, just trusting in like practice as well as trying to improve your play just all the time, constantly, I would say don't get discouraged. I think Ace can definitely do it at a big event. And that's all I got for you today. Thanks for watching.